views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
All right, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, many of our viewers have been dealing with unsafe building conditions. Is there someone who can help? The answer is yes, and we will have an attorney on set to help you take back control of your living arrangements. Next, you have given some of the best years of your life to your employer. But when you get hurt on the job, suddenly no one is there for you. Our expert will be on set to tell you everything you need to know about workers' compensation. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also, make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Today's Verdict and check us out at BronxNet.tv/legal. And remember, always email me if you have any issues at davidlesh@bronxnet.org. Nearly half the tenants at 911 Walton have been going through unsafe building conditions while also dealing with an increase in rent. Luckily, attorney Samuel Goldberg is here with much needed advice. Samuel, thanks for coming back.
How are you? Thanks for having me.
One of the reasons we have you back is unsafe building conditions and issues with the warranty of habitability is always something the viewers want to discuss.
Of course.
And as we're getting into the cold season, I thought it was a good idea that maybe you could shed some light on some of the things that tenants should be looking for during the change of weather.
Of course. Well, I mean, the most important thing right now is heat. Everybody needs heat. It's getting colder, obviously. It's approaching Christmas time. As of right now, at nighttime, it has to be 62 degrees in your apartment. And during the day, it has to be 68 degrees in your apartment. So if it's ever below those two numbers throughout the day or the night, you can call 311, report a violation. But the thing is, when you call 311 and the HPD inspector comes out, you got to make sure that the heat is below that threshold.
So let's back up again. So
Sure.
Let's say you're having this issue and you call 311. Do they take the information right on the phone and then send you a confirmation? Do they just send somebody out? How does it usually work?
What I recommend is you bring an HP proceeding. It's Housing Preservation Department. You go down to the courthouse. If you're in the Bronx, obviously, you go to Bronx Housing Court. And you actually fill out a proceeding. It's very easy. You can do it on your own. And then when you fill out the proceeding, you write exactly what you believe is wrong in your apartment. You write down every violation that you believe that exists, whether it's lack of heat, lack of hot water. You may have cockroaches, for example, or there's mold, or there's water coming down. So you would write a whole list out. You would put the HPD inspector on notice. You would make up a date for the HPD inspector to come. They would take a look around. You would show them exactly where you believe these violations exist. The HPD inspector jots their notes, and they decide whether or not there's a violation. After the HPD inspector comes, you also get a court date on that time. So then you would go to court, and when you go to court, you will see exactly what the violations are.
Now, does the landlord get a copy of everything that's already been sent to 311, or how does that work?
I mean, you serve the landlord with your papers. So you would serve the HPD proceeding. And then when you go to court, if you go online even, you can go online and look it up. So if you go on the HPD website, you can actually look up to see whether or not there are violations in your building. There could be common area violations. And you can also look to see if another apartment in your building has violations listed. But the one thing to remember about an HP proceeding is you're not getting any money out of this. If they choose not to make repairs in your apartment, the city fines them. There's ABC violations.
So where does that money go?
It goes to New York City.
So,
New York City
the tenant doesn't get any of this. Okay.
Exactly. But the good thing about this is, I mean, if you want to do warranty of habitability, a lot of tenants decide that they don't want to pay their rent because they don't think they should based on the fact that there's all these different violations. So they think they're entitled to an abatement. So sometimes what tenants do is they don't pay their rent and then the landlord bring a non-payment proceeding against them. But if you brought an HP for that non-payment proceeding, this is very good evidence to have to demonstrate to a judge, I'm entitled to an abatement, judge. I brought this HP proceeding. Look at all the
So
violations
it's always
that were
best
listed.
to bring the HP action before the
Before
the
they would bring a
landlord
non-pay.
brings any kind of non-pay for you.
Exactly, but I mean, I don't recommend to people not to pay their rent. It's
No,
their
no, but if-
decision, obviously. But if you want an abatement, that's one way to go. The other way you can go is you can pay your rent and then bring a proceeding against your landlord. If it's less than $5,000, you can bring small claims action for warranty of habitability, for
Now,
instance.
also, with these, with the cold weather and the fact that you're not getting the heat and hot water, from what I understand from the viewers, many times the pipes burst, and then you have the leaks all throughout the apartment. Are you finding this as well?
Of course, yeah, that happens a lot. I mean, another thing to realize is whether or not they're rent controlled or rent stabilized. If you're a rent stabilized or rent controlled tenant, you have a lot more rights than a free market tenant. So in that situation, you can actually go to DHCR, the Division of Housing and Community Renewal, and you can say you want what's called a rent reduction. And until the landlord fixes or repairs the violations, such as the pipes, your rent would be reduced to the prior legal regulated rent before you signed your current lease. So let's say, for example,
Give me an yeah.
right now your lease is $1,800,
Right.
but last year your prior lease was $1,600. So DHCR could write an order reducing the rent to $1,600, the prior rent, and until they made the repairs, they wouldn't increase the rent back to the $1,800. So this kind of makes the landlord have incentive to want to make repairs on your apartment because they're losing
How
money.
often are you successful with?
I mean, it's pretty successful.
It is.
I mean, it's case specific, obviously, but I mean, if you do that, it's pretty successful.
Okay, let's move to some of the other violations that seem to be happening. Some of them are all year round. Rats,
Yeah.
and vermin.
Yeah.
Have you?
I mean, it goes. It's really the same proceeding. You either bring an HP proceeding, or you can call 311 if you don't want to bring the HP. But my suggestion is you always bring that HP proceeding, because why wouldn't you? It's really no skin off your back. You're the petitioner. You're the one bringing it against your landlord, and that truly protects your rights. I've seen a lot of times where people don't call 311. They send emails to their landlord, but nothing's as good as either calling 311 or bringing this HP proceeding.
I've been seeing many emails about bed bugs.
Yeah.
Tell me what you know about the bed bug epidemic in the Bronx.
They're all over the place, bed bugs. It's terrible. It's terrible. I mean,
all of a sudden, where were they?
maybe
15 years ago.
Maybe they were in
20 years
Manhattan.
ago.
Now they're migrating over here.
I didn't really know too much about them when I was younger.
I know. I mean, I sound like a broken record, but it's the same. It's the same thing. You got to bring that HP, or if you're rent stabilized or rent control, you go to DHCR and try to get a rent reduction. I mean, moving over a little bit, let's say, for instance, the apartment is in such disrepair that you can't even live there. It's so terrible. The ceiling's down, the walls are coming in, there's mold everywhere. They may issue what's called a vacate order. So if a vacate order is issued, you can go to have your rent reduced to $1 during the time that you're not able to live in the apartment. But once again, that's also for rent stabilized and rent control. They have a lot more protections than the free market tenants, but even as a free market, you can always call 311.
Now, let's talk a little about the order to show cause. I know a lot of tenants feel they just go and they try and take out an order to show cause. What does that really mean? So, because I get questions many times. I want to do an order to show cause, but they don't even know what it means. Tell the viewers
In
what that
terms
means.
of warranty of habitability,
That's
the
correct.
HP proceeding, I mean, an order to show cause means you need relief immediately, instantaneously. You don't have time to wait. You can't just do it by notice of petition and petition. You need immediate assistance. And by filing an order to show cause, the judge will theoretically cut you to the top of the line so you can see the judge as soon as possible.
So let's say you're locked out. Let's say your landlord locks you out. There's an illegal lockout. You can't wait for an HP proceeding.
Well, that would be an illegal lockout proceeding.
Okay.
So and you would be in there. The judge usually had you in there within 2 days, immediately.
So what have you seen in your office recently? What kind of cases have you been seeing?
Recently, it's a lot of rat cases, bed bug infestation. There's always mold, a lot of
mold is
water
a big
damage.
thing.
It's huge. I mean, if there's water damage, then there's going to be mold. So
But
they
I
go
think,
hand in
you know,
hand.
and I think we were discussing this a little bit offset. I mean, people think just because they have, a mold issue, that their breathing issue is connected to the mold, and that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
And it's hard to really say that, well, your mold issue is causing you to have asthma when much of the Bronx has asthma. So
Well, normally, I mean, that's more personal injury,
Right.
and normally I would tell them to go see a personal injury attorney. I mean, you can still file the HP, but if you're experiencing asthma, you really should go speak with a personal injury attorney. You should see a doctor and get that taken under
Mold,
control.
bed bugs. What else have you been seeing? What other?
Mold, bed bugs. I mean, I've seen a lot of times where there's defective windows, and especially now in the wintertime, you don't want defective
You know,
windows.
like the springs are broken and they
Correct.
come down and they get the hands.
Exactly, and a lot of times they won't close, so people have these windows that are wide open and it's freezing outside, and that's terrible also. So the windows are a very big deal during the wintertime as well.
Tips. Let's give some final tips that you always do.
Sure.
Someone who's watching tonight, they're having some issues with their landlord, repairs. Tell me what you should tell them.
My final tip is call 311, file the HP. If you don't want to file the HP, that's fine, but the most important thing you do is you must put your landlord on notice.
And where do we find you? This is important.
Oh, thank you. It's gslnylaw.com, Goldberg, Scudieri, and Lindenberg.
All right, and maybe we'll have you back on in the spring, see what's going on
It's
there.
always fun to see you.
All right. All right, we have to take a quick break, but don't worry, we'll be back with more of today's verdict right after this.
Welcome, everybody. We are open. I'm the Dr. Bob Lee from 107.5 WBLS. You can catch me on there each and every night right after the Quiet Storm. You can catch me right here on Open, 10 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and 10 o'clock. Let's just call it on the 10s and then just keep it tuned. And we got you covered like a blanket, okay? I'm out in the community and we're all over the place because we are now open.
I'll never forget the day our landlord called and said, read your lease. No pets allowed. My owner tells him my dog ate the lease, but that didn't work. And now I'm stuck in a shelter. But this pit bull is ready for a new crib. I'm loving, loyal, and play well with others. So don't be intimidated by all my muscles, because the biggest one I have is my heart. That's right, I said it.
Well, Thomas, you've got prediabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have prediabetes. Big time.
For all the papas out there, let's stop what we're doing and take a moment. A moment to be with our kids. They can be loud moments, goofy moments, sporty moments, dorky moments, kooky moments. Moments where we talk or walk or just hang out. It doesn't really matter. They all count because every time dads take a moment to be with their kids, well, it's pretty momentous. So let's all take a moment to make a moment today.
Leaving hot coals improperly extinguished can cause a wildfire.
Hey guys, it's Smokey!
It looks as if Smokey is going to use the drown, stir, drown and feel technique. After the first drown, a good start. Next, another drink. And finally, a close feel.
Is it cool? Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Smokey, catch. Oh, my bad, Smokey.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
All right, we're here with Ariella Herman talking all things workers' compensation. Ariella, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you know, at the very onset, let's begin. What types of accidents really occur on the job? What have you seen mostly in your office?
All types of accidents, from simple slip and falls to falling over debris at construction sites, nurses lifting patients who are heavy and pulling out their backs.
Now, a lot of these accidents that happen, by the way, you'd think that the employee lays on the ground and somebody runs out with a pen and paper and takes a report, but sometimes that's not the case. Am I correct? Sometimes they may not report it for days after the accident.
Many times they don't even realize that something significant happened. They're working and they're busy working and something happens and they continue to work. Sometimes it's just energy. They keep on going, or they're really good workers who've been doing this for many years and they don't realize it's serious till they get home. They lay down, they go to sleep, they wake up in the morning, they're in a lot of pain.
Okay, and I know, and I've been, you know, from my own experience, that a lot of times the individuals that are hurt initially believe they can bring a lawsuit against their employer, and they can't do that. Why is that?
That's correct. That's the law in all 50 states. You cannot sue your employer. There's a social contract that was, put into place many years ago, basically saying that you can't sue your employer, but in return, they created a system called the workers' compensation system to compensate employees for their injuries.
And that's in New York.
Correct.
All right, so let's go through a little bit of that law. What protects you as an employee if you can't bring a lawsuit against your own employer?
Well, you have an insurance claim. It's called a workers' compensation claim, and you file that. It's basically every employer in the state of New York is required to carry insurance to cover any injuries to their employees, and you file a claim once you get injured.
Now, I can see there are situations where it can get a little bit messy. For instance, you were talking about, let's say, the nurse who slips and falls at a hospital, right?
Correct.
There may be, let's say, a cleaning company or somebody who waxes the floors, somebody who's not necessarily the person who's writing your check. What do you say about that?
So I tell all my clients who come in, brand new clients, if they come into my office, if my secretary's working for me, she comes into my office, I dug a hole in the floor, I'm totally negligent, and she slips and falls and breaks her leg, she can't sue me, she's my employee. The only thing she's entitled to is comp. But if I send her across the street to buy me stamps, and as she's going across the street, she gets hit by a car, she's entitled to two things. She's got a workers' compensation claim. She was working for me when the accident happened, and she can sue the driver of the car. She doesn't work for him, and he was negligent and shouldn't have hit her.
Now, here's a little bit of a rub. Let me ask you a question, see if you know this. Will they recover no-fault benefits because the vehicle hit the person, or will they recover workers' compensation benefits? Which one is it?
They will recover both, actually.
Both, all right. Why is that?
But, well, they have two cases, like I said.
Okay.
They have a case of workers' comp that's open and shut because they were working for me when the accident happened, and they can sue the driver of the car. However, you should know that there is a lien on any workers' compensation payments.
All right. And there's not necessarily a lien on the no-fault insurance payments, so you're probably better off getting the no-fault before you get the workers' comp, but you got to do whatever the statute says, whatever you get first, I assume.
Correct.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about filing a claim, because I think many people think that they need a lawyer, which I'm sure they do. How do you go about filing a workers' compensation claim?
So two things. Number one is that you have to notify your employer within 2 weeks of any accident that happens on the job. If 2 weeks go by and you have not notified your employer that you had an accident at work and you are aware that you had an accident at work, you could be cut off from your benefits. So it's very important to notify your employer right away that you had an accident on the job. Their human resources department should get things rolling for you, but many times they don't. So it's important to get to an attorney right away to get your file claimed separately with the Workers' Compensation Board.
What generally, in terms of an insurance company disclaiming for a workers' comp issue, what, a month, 2 months? How much time do you have to give notice?
So you do need to give notice to your employer within 2 weeks. You do have 2 years to file a claim with the Workers' Compensation Board.
So let's say you don't give your employer the 2 weeks notice, 3 weeks, a month. Do you risk really losing your workers' comp case?
You do. You would really have to make the argument that you didn't realize that it was a work-related injury, or that you didn't realize how serious it was, or that you were injured in the first place. It's a tough one to make.
Give me an example of maybe some situations where it really turns out not to be a workers' comp claim, even though the person was necessarily hurt on the job. Can you give me any of those situations? Like, what if the employer, for instance, doesn't have workers' compensation insurance?
He's still responsible. There's a no insurance unit at the Workers' Compensation Board, and that'll eventually, once they do an investigation and see that the employer had no insurance, that'll be transferred to the no insurance unit.
How about, let's say, you're paid off the books?
They're still responsible for your
matter.
work. Correct.
Even if you're off the books?
Even if you're off the books.
Now, can you still bring a lawsuit against them if they're off the books? Or are you also barred at that point as well?
Right. So either they're your employer or they're not. So if they're your employer, it's workers' compensation, and you cannot sue them. If they're not your employer, then you can sue them.
Let's talk about, let's say you qualify, hopefully you do. What are some of the benefits that are available to you?
So two major things. Number one is medical. All of your medical care is taken over by comp, so you never pay for anything out of pocket. You never use a private insurance. There are no co-pays. Everything is paid for by workers' compensation insurance. And number 2 would be money for you for the injuries, either while you're out of work, if you're missing time from work, or there's something called permanency as well.
Is there a schedule or something that they look at to figure out exactly how much you would be getting based on each particular injury, or does that not happen?
No, there is, but there's really 2 categories of injury under the law. There's bodily injuries, such as head, neck, and back, and they're treated a certain way. And then there are extremity injuries, and those are treated a completely different way.
Oh, give me an example. How are they treated?
So bodily injuries, head, neck, and back, when someone is out of work, they're entitled to payments, weekly payments, while they're out of work. Same thing with extremity injuries. The only difference is on extremity injuries, even if someone never loses a day of work, they're entitled eventually to a payout on the permanent injury to those body parts.
All right, so only because I think that the viewers really want to make sure, is there a point when you're collecting workers' compensation for that 6 months period or a year that you're continually under the treatment of your doctor, or do you have to see the insurance company's workers' compensation doctor? How does that work?
So you're going to always be under the, treatment of your own doctor. However, the insurance company, once they're paying you, has a right to have you examined by one of their doctors every 3 months.
Every 3 months? And what if
Correct.
you don't go?
If you don't go and you miss 2 appointments, they can cease paying you.
They'll cut you off.
Correct.
All right, so at these workers' compensation visits where you go and see their doctor, does the attorney go with the client, or do they go on their own, or depends?
Usually not. They go on their own. We do give them some advice on how to handle those appointments, but they do go on their
Well,
own.
I understand there's also a hearing or something. What is that?
Correct. So a hearing would be if there are issues that aren't being resolved. Many times insurance companies don't start paying people even though they're out of work and they have the correct medical showing that they should be out of work. Insurance company doesn't pay, we request a hearing before a judge. The judge has to direct them to pay. Sometimes there are issues, body parts that are part of the case. We established the head, but now the person's having back issues as well. We need to add the back to the case. Different issues come up over the time period of the case that we need hearings before a judge.
Give me an example of maybe a workers' comp hearing you've been on recently where it got a little bit convoluted.
Okay, so many times it's really about adding additional body parts, and this is why I tell most of my clients, whatever is bothering you, make sure to tell the doctor now, because a lot of times people concentrate on the thing that's bothering them the most. So they fall and they have a knee injury and that knee's killing them and they deal with the knee, but once the knee is dealt with, about 3-4 months later, they say, hey, you know what, I also hurt my neck when I fell and my neck's been getting worse and worse. 3-4 months into the case, the insurance company doesn't want to hear about a neck that they never heard about for 3-4 months.
Because they'll think the neck was pre-existing or injured someplace else.
Correct. So it becomes contentious.
What do you do about that?
So
Battle of doctors? I mean, how does it work?
Correct. That's exactly what it is. It's a battle of doctors. We have, our clients' doctors giving one opinion. They get sent to an insurance company doctor to get his opinion. If he gives a different one than our doctor, we go to depositions, and ultimately the judge makes a decision.
I had a case, and I just want to ask your opinion on it, since I do have you here. A few years ago, we had a case where somebody was injured at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Now, Memorial Sloan Kettering has 5 different buildings, and our client was injured in the 5th building all the way 3/4 down the block, even farther. Yet when we sued Memorial Sloan Kettering for the accident, they said it was covered by workers' compensation, even though the employee was really working at a completely different building from the entire main building. Does that happen many times where, the courts stretch to try and make sure that workers' comp covers as opposed to being able to bring a personal injury action, or no?
Yes, it's an interesting question. We sometimes have, as you mentioned, uninsured employers, and someone claims to be a subcontractor. A client of ours will be working for what he said was a subcontractor. A subcontractor doesn't have insurance, but the contractor has insurance, and many times the law will stretch it and make the contractor the employer because he has insurance.
Yes, insurance, so they do that for benefits. How about some tips? Do you have any tips you would give to somebody, let's say before they get injured, things they should do to protect themselves or maybe to make sure they're employees? What would you say if somebody who's working just to get themselves to make sure that if this happens, they're going to be protected?
So I would ask your employer, make sure that they have workers' compensation insurance. Usually, if you're working in a large, company and you've got, many employees, you do have
But
insurance.
in the Bronx, a lot of times you have small businesses. How do you make sure if you're in a small business?
Well, simply ask your boss. Do you have workers' compensation
Okay,
insurance?
and how about once you're injured, what advice would you give to somebody who may have been injured on the job?
2 things: notify your employer and get to a hospital.
Okay, now you've been injured. You went to the hospital. Your claim is going for 6 months to a year. What would you tell somebody?
It's a long, drawn-out system, so it really would depend on each individual situation, but it does take time. It's not a quick system.
And most importantly, where do we find you? Because I'm sure viewers are going to want to reach out to you if they've been injured on the job. Go ahead.
So give me a call, 212-962-3362.
All right, and the name of the firm?
It's Katz, Leidman, Freund, and Herman.
All right, well, thank you. And I hope you come back, give us some more information in the future.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, we have to take a quick break, but don't worry, we'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this.
Hey, I'm Darren Jaime. I'm the host of Wednesdays Open right here on BronxNet Television, Channel 67, and also on Verizon Files, Channel 33. Want to invite you every Wednesday. You get an opportunity to see what's going on in the world of news, current events, debates, public information. That's what happens here on Open every Wednesday. So we invite you to join us right here on BronxNet Television.
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. How could you not love him?
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
You think getting dumped by text is harsh? Try getting dumped by a tennis ball. My ex-owner drove me out to the woods, yelled fetch, and by the time I brought the ball back, he was gone. Yeah, I was pissed. But the folks at the shelter helped me let go of my anger. I learned coping skills, like taking it to the hole. Boom! Now I'm ready to fetch again. But how about I throw and you run and get it?
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us and, of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also, remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. For myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.